In the southeast of Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula separates the Caribbean Sea from the Gulf of Mexico. The Yucatan is one of the heartlands of the Maya civilization. The peninsula comprises 3 of the 31 states that make up the Republic of Mexico. Yucatan is a flat plateau rising to just a few meters above sea level. At different places along the shore, the mangrove swamp is a true sanctuary for wildlife. A very wide variety of tropical fauna live on the peninsula. Over the last few years, a number of biosphere reserves and national parks have been created to protect a rich but fragile environment. Many species, some of them endemic, played a fundamental role in Maya culture. Species both of animals and plants. Nature is omnipresent, but has to be contained so that the architectural heritage does not disappear from view. The mainly Catholic Yucatan population has much in common with the rest of the people of Mexico. The inhabitants are very young, with nearly half of them under 20. The Maya are still very much in evidence in Yucatan. They make up more than half the population, and many influences have come to enrich their culture. Schools in Yucatan are bilingual for the first few years. The children are taught in Spanish and Mayan, a language that for a long time remained an oral tradition, but which is now written using the Latin alphabet. The principles governing the traditional Mayan housing are still adhered to. They use traditional materials, and modern architecture still has recourse to them. Only the building techniques have been perfected. The Spanish colonial period left a very visible imprint in the architecture. Buildings from that period form part of a carefully preserved history. The Maya often used the platform. It's one of the characteristics of their architecture. But the most spectacular element of their heritage is the stepped pyramid, whose truncated top served as a platform for the temple, as can be seen at the famous site of Chichen Itza. The pyramid, of course, makes us think of Egypt, but the Egyptians had technical means at their disposal that the Maya didn't know about. At Chichen Itza, homage is paid to a divinity worshipped throughout the region, the plumed serpent. A rectangular court and stone rings were used for a ball game. 2 teams played with a rubber ball. The aim of the game was to get the ball through the hole without using your hands or your feet. The losing team, or the winners according to some historians, could have their heads cut off as a sacrifice to the gods. The Spanish took possession of Yucatan in the 16th century. They weren't interested in the ritual objects of the Maya because they weren't made of gold. The Maya resistance to the invader was weakened by internal rivalry. The triumphant Spanish imposed the Catholic religion and a very centralized organization. They imported their traditions. Religion became the pretext for their conquest and the cement of their empire. Despite a leaning towards independence, Yucatan became a permanent part of Mexico in 1848. The history of Yucatan has been turbulent, but Maya traditions have always remained vigorous. The work of craftsmen is another factor that helps traditions to survive. The products of nature, like plant fibers, provide large quantities of materials that are easy to work with. Music and dance, too, keep very ancient traditions alive. Music pervades the holidays of the many tourists visiting the Yucatan. Tourism is one of the main resources of the peninsula. The year-round warm climate and the beaches of the Caribbean coast attract visitors. As far as possible, small infrastructures take their inspiration from traditional architecture and try to blend with natural surroundings. Water sports and beach activities can be combined with exploration of the coasts. These are natural resources that Yucatan promotes as much as its archaeological vestiges. There are many ways to discover the sites, whether they are the work of man or the work of nature. It's very important here to respect the environment and to be very familiar with it. One good way is to enjoy a stay in the very heart of nature. Yucatan has a dense and widespread communications network. Renewable energy complements plentiful oil resources. Cancun Airport is, for millions of visitors, the best way to enter into Maya culture. In the north of the Yucatan Peninsula, the town of Cancun is a port of entry to the Riviera Maya, which stretches along 100 or so kilometers of Caribbean shoreline. There are many islands lying offshore. Some are nature reserves. Others, like Isla Mujeres, are devoted to tourism. Isla Mujeres is nearly 7 kilometers long. It's the easternmost tip of Mexico. Lying partly on the mainland, the town of Cancun was designed solely with tourists in mind. On a ring of dunes, an impressive number of hotels stand cheek by jowl, the fruit of the huge civil engineering works started at the end of the 1960s. Between the sea and the lagoons, the idea of the designers was to free up Acapulco, the Pacific's great seaside resort. And it must be said that from that point of view, it's quite a success. Everything here is aimed at leisure and relaxation. Great golf champions have designed their own courses in an area that is as lively by day as it is by night. The mariachis are experts at creating a fun atmosphere. They use brass instruments and guitars, which first came here with the Spanish. Regional traditions, of course, form the basis of the show. Elsewhere, in a different style, the night is still young, and nightclubs offer shows that are awesome. wave of color and sound, you let yourself get swept away by the tropical frenzy. The Caribbean Sea proclaims the color of the Riviera Maya. Running from north to south, the road serves a tourist region that was created in the 1990s. Along the Riviera Maya, whether you turn towards the sea or inland, there's nothing to interrupt the view. As there is absolutely no high land, a few rocks on the beach stand out. But there's nothing to disturb the family dip. Its reputation knows no bounds. The Playa del Carmen area has changed completely. It used to be a small fishing village. It has been modernized to respond to the needs of tourists following the success of Cancun. Here too, the sea provides much to enjoy. Visitors can get to know Mexican customs. This is why the voladores get together. The skilled performances of the voladores can be seen almost anywhere in Mexico, but the origins of the tradition are as remote as they're obscure. To the sound of the flute and a small drum, the men, hanging upside down, swing 13 times around a mast. In some cases, the aim of the ritual ceremony was to bring an end to a drought. It was also a way to attract the goodwill of the gods. The place where the sky is born. In Mayan, Sian. This is the name of a biosphere reserve beside the Caribbean Sea. It's a UNESCO heritage site and access to it is regulated. Specialized Mayan guides are allowed in there, but must keep to very precise itineraries. One of the guides is Alberto Sencamal.
There's an artificial canal that was done by the Maya between Muil and Chuñache, so they could get across the swamp by canoe. But there are also natural canals. This one where we are now is a natural canal 8 or 9 kilometers long that connects with the sea.
In the swamp, the mangroves stand on their aerial roots. They form an impenetrable tangle in the brackish water. The geography of the area has been known for centuries.
Este canal fue usado por los antiguos mayas como ruta de comercio. Los mayas que vivían de Guatemala, Belice, Honduras, Centroamérica viajaban de ahí hacia la ciudad de Muil.
They took with them goods such as jade, clay, precious stones, pretzel feathers, cochinille, cacao, coffee, and they exchanged them with the Maya of Muil.
Remains scattered over the reserve attest to the proximity of the town of Muil, one of the first Maya cities on the Caribbean coast. But the main aim of the reserve is above all to protect the environment and the many species of birds that come to live in these semi-aquatic surroundings.
En la reserva tenemos 368 especies de aves, incluyendo acuáticas terrestres.
Certain specimens of the local fauna prefer to stand in the water's edge. Others prefer to drift along wherever the current takes them, an ecological and relaxed way of going exploring through the colors of nature. Still on the Riviera Maya, the Actun Chen Nature Reserve helps us to understand the very particular geology of the Yucatan. The peninsula is formed of a vast limestone plateau. This is a very friable rock that is easily penetrated by water and roots. Mineral and vegetable are very closely linked here, to such an extent that it is sometimes very difficult to tell one from the other. Roots and stalactites follow the same vertical movement. The Yucatan Plateau emerged from the Jurassic period 150 million years ago. Since then, the abundant rains of the region have eroded the limestone. They have created the cenotes, a geological phenomenon that Victor Orwayo knows well.
The word cenote was deformed by the Mayas, by the Spanish people, because in Maya, not is the real pronunciation. So the Spanish people, when they arrive, they're looking for water. And Maya's people all the time say the word not, and then change it to cenote because they cannot pronounce it. But the meaning is underground well. So there are cenotes open, enclosed like this one in the cave, and a half moon, but all is fresh water. So the Maya civilization used it for survive.
Because the rain soaks quickly into the ground, there are no rivers on the surface in the Yucatan.
In all of the cenotes are connected one to the other ones, but the water runs toward the coast and goes to the ocean. So all in Yucatan Peninsula there are many cenotes.
Water was vital for the Maya, just as it is for the park's animals, like those of the deer family or the parrots. The parrot is one of Yucatan's fetish animals. The Maya wanted it for its feathers, which were used to decorate the priest's robes. The collared peccary was much appreciated by the Maya for its taste. The monkey was one of their astrological signs. We can get close to the wild animals in the nature reserves. The dolphins don't have to be asked twice. You can get just as close to the manatee or sea cow, a peaceful mammal and an endangered species that sailors thought was a mermaid. The crocodile, however, doesn't inspire the same level of trust. Looking out on the Caribbean Sea, the iguana can remain motionless and therefore unnoticed for hours. Against its rocky background, the Maya site of Tulum is perfectly adapted to the environment. The Maya appeared in the 2nd millennium BC. They developed a spectacular culture, which declined at the end of the 1st millennium AD. Whether war, epidemics, or drought, the precise reasons for their decline are still unknown. The walls are built of blocks of limestone that were cut with stone tools. A mortar made from crushed and burned limestone was used to assemble the blocks. A number of structures still bear the traces of paint and bas-relief sculptures. The colors have deteriorated because of the hot, damp climate of the Yucatan. And yet the city of Tulum is not very old. It was still occupied by the Maya when the Spanish conquistadors arrived. The city was abandoned in the middle of the 16th century. A few temples were still frequented for a number of years, and then the town disappeared into oblivion. The tropical forest has often overgrown the Maya sites. This is the case on the Coba site, one of the largest in the Yucatan. Many vestiges are still scattered over a wide area, only a small part of which has been excavated. The public seating for the ball game still exists. A calendar testifies to the astronomical and mathematical knowledge of the Maya. Like ours, their calendar had 365 days. It's quite a distance from one edifice to the next. In the Maya cities, the buildings are never positioned by chance. There is always a rational explanation for where they're placed. Thus, the temple of Uxmal stands in an area that groups structures with the same religious purpose. At one crossroads, there's a building from which it was possible to watch what was going on in the town. The buildings have survived because the limestone, even though it is easy to work, hardens with time. In the village of Coba, a Maya tradition survives in the form of a pottery school. Maya ceramists belong to an elite. They mastered elaborate techniques that Agustín Villalba has made accessible to everyone.
The mission of the school is also to give them back their self-esteem as a culture, because during the process of the conquest, all the Mayan arts were forbidden, especially the Mayan pottery, because in the pottery there is a lot of information about the gods, the religion, the rituals, and that is the hardest part of my work, is to change their way of thinking, not to teach them pottery, but to make them understand that they have a beautiful culture and they should be proud of it.
The artifacts are put on sale to provide the school with the money to buy the raw materials. The small town of Valladolid lies inland. It was founded by the Spanish conquerors on the site of a former Maya city. The Maya ruins provided the stones for the construction of different buildings. Valladolid is in the state of Yucatan. It was named after the city which was the first capital of the Kingdom of Spain. The ruler straight streets are typical of the towns created by the Spanish in America. The town's convent was created by Franciscan monks. The Franciscans built the first monasteries in Mexico. The missionaries played a great part in the evangelization of the Maya and of the native populations of America. And yet the Maya were not assimilated because many of them in the Yucatan were still resisting up to the middle of the 19th century. The Maya were not great sailors. In the Yucatan, most of the towns they created were built inland. Covering a huge area, the site of Balam didn't give up its secrets until the middle of the 1990s. Arturo Castaneda is well acquainted with the history of the site.
It was the last, one of the last cities founded in the peninsula of Yucatan. It's considered as important as Chichen Itza in their times. Now the highlights to this place is that we now know already the name to this archaeological site. Probably is Talol. According to the experts, the translation of the correct Mayan symbols, which says the Mayan name of this city, is Talol. Ekbalan is the name given by the archaeologists when they discovered, which means in Mayan language, a black jaguar.
Some buildings are in a remarkable state of preservation. Some of the details of the pyramid had been covered with sand to protect them from vandalism. Izamal is a small town which still bears a Maya name. The area has always been inhabited, even after the Spanish landed in the region. The Maya had no animals to use for power or transport. The Spanish introduced the horse into America. Mario Alvarez keeps up a family tradition.
The horse-drawn carriage is a Yucatan tradition. It was the usual means of transport for villages. But now these carriages that we have here in Izamal are mainly meant for tourists. We have exactly 27 of these carriages with their horses to take tourists around. My carriage is a family heirloom from my parents, from my grandparents. It's 80 years old and I've been driving it every day for 30 years.
You see the color yellow everywhere in the town. It reproduces the color of a Franciscan monastery. In the middle of the 16th century, the influence of the Franciscans was expanding.
The Franciscan friars introduced the Catholicism in this place. So little by little, this was considered the capital of the Catholicism right here in Yucatan, in old Mexico.
To the detriment of their own culture, the native populations were for a long time dominated by the Catholic Church. Pope John Paul II paid a tribute to them when he celebrated a mass at Izamal. The town was built directly on the Maya monuments as if it were meant to crush them. But this didn't take account of the size, number, and volume of the structures. 5 centuries after the arrival of the Spanish, the edifices of the Maya still look down on the town. No Spanish town was built on the site of Uxmal. The monuments are made up of perfectly cut blocks. It has all been restored, but the site was better preserved than others. Uxmal is also different from the rest. The lower part of the monuments is not decorated, unlike the upper parts, which in general are lavishly embellished. The highest parts were in fact reserved for the priests and for worshipping the gods. The Spanish used to replace the Maya name of a building with a new name. Thus, a building which they thought was a convent was rechristened Quadrangle of the Nuns. In fact, it was a palace used by the city government. Uxmal rose to the peak of its power, then went into decline in barely 150 years, in the 9th and 10th centuries AD. At that time in Europe, Romanesque architecture was in its infancy. Was the town conquered by a rival city? Did an exceptional drought force the inhabitants to flee? We cannot be sure. Now we head north. The whole of the peninsula is really a huge, low plain. At barely 8 meters altitude, the capital of the state of Yucatan comes into sight, Merida. It was founded in the second half of the 16th century. Merida Cathedral is one of the oldest in the Americas. Its austere lines convey the might of all-conquering Spain. Beside the cathedral, in the former bishop's palace, a museum of contemporary art has been created. The works of art seem to recapture the elementary geometrical forms given such a fine expression by the Maya. In fact, Merida is an open-air museum. Colonial architecture has left many traces on which Mexico has superimposed its colorful imprint. And yet Merida is sometimes called the White Town. Many buildings are in fact built with a very pale limestone. The Palacio Montejo was built for a conquistador. The neoclassical style completes the architectural panorama of a town which has made an amalgam of all its components. Between the church built by the Jesuits in the 17th century and the Altar de la Patria, the Altar of the Motherland, a 1950s monument celebrating independence, Mexico's history reached a tipping point. But the cultural style of the Maya has remained. The monument pays homage to all the peoples of America, united to bring closure to their colonial past. At the beginning of the 20th century, some families in Merida made their fortunes. Their houses still bear witness to their success. Most of these nouveaux riches were farmers. One of these sumptuous residences contains a range of different craft products. Beliefs and the stars, legends and rituals, all the favorite subjects of Mayan culture are represented. One of the typical products of Merida is the hammock. Hammock is a word that originated in Central America. A good quality hammock is made according to a strict and ancient tradition.
Los primeros indicios son de hace más de 3,000 años. Los mayas de esta tierra empezaron a urdir las hamacas de la forma tradicional, que es un bastidor de madera, una aguja y una fibra. Una hamaca de calidad se ve que está cerrado, el tejido es muy cerradito, se puede ver una hamaca que está hecha de una manera económica, se ve como esto. Como se ve acá mis dedos. Los hilos muy separados.
The Maya were intrigued by the appearance and disappearance of the sun. A large part of their cosmogony is based on the movements of the sun. The agave is a plant that originated in America. One of its varieties has brought great wealth to many landowners in Yucatan. In this authentic hacienda or farm, agave leaves are being harvested. They contain very tough fibers that they call Henequen. The fiber is also known as sisal. Here, visitors are shown how sisal is produced. Sandy Ereli Flores Góngora.
This is a living museum. Here, there are people working, people producing. It's the only living Henequen museum in the whole Yucatan Peninsula. It's the only place where you can see the production from start to finish, from the plantation to the way different ropes are made in a rope maker's. Here, everything is done by hand, like in the haciendas, whereas in factories, like the ones in Merida and other countries, the process is industrial.
Henequen is the Mayan name for sisal. The Maya kept it for domestic uses. The Spanish gave it a worldwide application, using it for the rigging on ships. And its success grew and grew. At its peak, Yucatan sisal supplied 90% of the raw material for rigging in the world. Production then moved to Africa, and it became just a piece of Mexico's history. About 1,000 haciendas produced the sisal. Some of them have transformed themselves into charming hotels so as not to disappear. Here you can get an idea of the way of life and the quiet luxury of the great landowners. By rebelling against a system that exploited them, the Maya dealt the first blow to the production of sisal. The appearance of synthetic fiber damaged it even more. On the shore of the Gulf of Mexico near Celestún, a nature reserve has been created in the mangrove swamp. As if they were standing on stilts, the plants, like the birds, stand high above the water to find their food. The Celestún Wildlife Refuge, also called the Mexican Flamingo Nature Reserve, owes its name to the famous wading birds.
Flamingos
The pink flamingos stay here because it's a place where they can feed. They live mainly on plankton.
The pink flamingo is an emblematic bird in Yucatan, and the Celestún ecosystem is unique. This huge marshy area combines the fresh water of the Celestún River and the salt water of the Gulf of Mexico. The hat, or more specifically the Panama or Jipijapa hat, is the speciality of Becal, a small town in the state of Campeche. Nothing predisposed Becal to emerge from anonymity, and yet its destiny changed in the middle of the 19th century. Today, a third of the adult population is involved in the making of hats. But why did the life of this quiet village change so radically? Answer: a dwarf palm tree imported by a Catholic priest. Its fibers are as fine as silk, and they gave birth to the famous hat.
The history of the Jipijapa comes from Ecuador. It's said that during the building of the Panama Canal, many important people used this type of hat. It had great success in the 20th century. A rich hacienda owner of the region, who was called Don Sixto Garcia, was given the job of importing fibers to the people here. They offered him a present of a hat, which came from Ecuador. He liked the hat very much and asked people he knew in Ecuador to teach the technique to the people here. People were trained, and that's how they started to make these hats in Becal.
I've been working in the hat business for 45 years. That's the process for making Riviera hats. After we've treated the fibers, we put them in the oven with coal and sulfur. We leave them in there overnight. The next day, we put them out in the sun and they turn white. Then we take them down to the cave because we need a damp place to work on them. We can't work on them here because they break.
In a dark cave dug into the limestone, an ordinary hat takes 2 or 3 days to make. But the very best hats can require 2 or 3 weeks' work.
Once the hat is finished in the cave, we bring it here to the press to give it its final shape. Different hats can have different shapes. Each hat will stay in the press for about 5 or 6 seconds to adopt its final shape, like this one.
The town of Campeche, capital of the state of Campeche, is one of the main towns in the peninsula. It has more than 200,000 inhabitants. Its Its position beside the Gulf of Mexico has made it Yucatan's main port. Very early on, it attracted often unwanted attention. Today, the port is mainly used by fishermen who take their catch from the teeming waters of the Gulf. Many species of fish are displayed on the stalls of the fishermen, who are so at home in these waters where the warm current of the Gulf Stream rises. In the 17th century, there were so many pirates that a defensive wall was raised to resist their incursions. In the corners, there were bastions to defend the entry to the port. In one of these fortified buildings, an archaeological museum has been created. In it, there's a funeral mask made of jade, the sacred stone of the Maya. Because of the finesse of their sculptures, the Maya were nicknamed the Greeks of the New World. The Maya feared death. Personal objects placed in the tomb were supposed to accompany the deceased into the life hereafter. The common people were buried under their houses. The town of Campeche also has a great number of buildings that are straight out of the colonial period, like the Cathedral of the Conception. The diversity of the historic buildings can be explained by the importance of the town, which was the bridgehead for the Spanish conquest in Yucatan. The government's administrators settled there with their families and their religion. The church, built in the 16th century in honor of St. Roman, is regularly attended by the faithful. They come for a very specific reason. They all pray to the Black Christ in the chancel of the church. The Black Christ, sculpted in ebony, was brought from Italy. A number of miracles have been attributed to it. The historic center of Campeche is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The street plan and the traditional buildings have been preserved. Other traditions have been maintained with great care for centuries, and building secrets have been passed down from one generation to the next. With the help of an ancient machine, chocolate paste is ground. Luz Angelica del Amor.
This is chocolate that's ready for eating. My grandmother used to sit at the table. And then we made balls like this one. And all the children sat around to make the bars of chocolate.
Chocolate brings back happy family memories, but it also evokes the memorable history of a people.
That reminds me that it was the favorite drink of our ancestors. The Maya were used to drinking chocolate, a drink that was reserved for the nobility, for priests and warriors. When the Spanish arrived, they discovered our cacao and took it back home. In Europe, in a way, they produced a blend of cultures by adding cinnamon, almonds, and sugar.
And that is how cacao gave rise to chocolate as we know it. A subtle blend of different ingredients and a love of tasty things.
Delicious. Do you want to taste?
Today in Campeche, there are no pirates to worry anyone. And at the end of the day, it's the moment to relax. When the sun goes down, it's a magical moment. Just just the right time for some keep fit. Another place for nighttime entertainment, the Zocalo, Independence Square. That's where they play collective bingo.
61, 42, 26.
You have to turn your back on the Gulf of Mexico and head inland to reach the main Maya sites, which are situated in the state of Campeche. Today, the primeval forest has grown back over the site of Edzna. Excavations have revealed that in the 7th century AD, the town had 70,000 inhabitants. The buildings reflect the political, economic, and religious power of the town. Maya buildings generally covered a large area of ground, and there are great open esplanades between the main structures. In Yucatán, too, the vegetation has grown back. For some historians, the deforestation practiced by the Maya to build their cities contributed to climate change in the peninsula. The severe droughts which resulted from this might have precipitated the end of their civilization. The city of Yucatán itself was not spared the problems of water supply, whereas the word Yucatán in Mayan means canyon carved out by water. The names of Maya sites can often teach us a lot. Discovered by a hunter, the site of Chicana holds no secrets for Eric Menoikuti.
El nombre de Chicaná significa casa de la boca de la serpiente y es precisamente debido a este edificio cuya fachada representa eso, un monstruo del inframundo que es representado casi como si fuera la forma de una serpiente o de un reptil. Si vemos también la plataforma inferior, esto lo que hace es representar el maxilar inferior de este monstruo. Si nosotros nos paráramos justo en la entrada de este edificio, sería como este animal que nos estuviera devorando. Eso es lo que trata de representar, como si el gobernante o el sacerdote estuviese pasando ese portal mágico para entrar hacia el inframundo.
The underworld is part of the Maya cosmos. It is made up of 9 levels that are also found in the pyramids. But at Chicana, the use of the pyramid as such was in decline.
Lo que predomina son las torres y no las grandes pirámides. Empiezan a ser los edificios más funcionales, empiezan a ser construcción más horizontal en vez de la construcción vertical, empiezan a ser más cuartos en vez de únicamente las pirámides masivas, como se puede observar, por ejemplo, en Calakmul.
Calakmul, an example of the ferocious rivalry that existed between Mayan towns.
Calakmul ejerce un dominio muy grande sobre toda la región, tratando de controlar todo el comercio, tratando de demostrar que ellos eran el linaje más importante de toda la región, y empieza a rivalizar con sitios principalmente como el actual Tikal o el antiguo reino de Bak, que es conocido actualmente como Palenque. Calakmul llega a tener el control de toda la región económicamente en cuanto a poder. Entonces llegan a construir una de las ciudades más importantes de todo el mundo maya.
According to the Maya, the gods had some difficulty in creating man. It was one of their unsuccessful attempts that produced the monkey.
Pirámides que estamos viendo en estos lugares, los sitios mayas, son una remembranza de lo que ocurrió en los momentos de la creación maya. El mundo fue creado a partir de un mar. Cuando los dioses deciden construir el mundo, lo primero que emerge de ahí son las montañas. Las montañas, que son la representación de la tierra, son las dadoras de todo, y es donde se encuentra también esta cueva mágica que los lleva al inframundo.
History gives the keys to let us into the Yucatan Peninsula. And yet there's still a shadow, the enigma of the mysterious collapse of a civilization. But there remains the vitality of a culture devoted to nature, the culture of the Maya.